Hey gremlins, black screen today. I just want to get this out of the way now. This isn't about me. If any of you fuckers want to give me shit for speaking out about a serious, uncomfortable issue because you just came here for my anime takes, I don't give a shit. So, quick summary. On Monday, May 25th, a black man named George Floyd was murdered by a white cop named Derek Chauvin. Chauvin and 3 other cops were sent to deal with an alleged forgery, but after Floyd was handcuffed, Chauvin got on top of him and pressed his knee into the back of his neck for over 8 minutes straight. All of this was recorded and posted online, and in the video you can hear Floyd crying out for help that he can't breathe, begging them to let him stand. And you can also hear these cops mocking him while he's pleading. On top of this, Floyd became completely unresponsive around 2.5 minutes before Chauvin finally got off of him, and someone had checked his pulse during those 2.5 minutes and found none. All 4 of these cops are guilty of murder as far as I'm concerned, especially with how they even looked like they were actively helping crush Floyd in a newer video that came out. And what made people even more angry on top of all of that was the fact that none of those cops were arrested until 4 days later, only after violent rioting started, of course, because why would we hold our police accountable for murder unless the public forces us to? Oh well, might as well arrest a random black reporter for no stated reason while leaving a white reporter who's doing the same thing alone. Oh, and before we arrest the murderer too. If you couldn't tell, I'm pissed. And the sad truth is that George Floyd's death is only the latest in a sickening line of incidents where black people are abused or murdered almost casually by cops, on top of getting little to no justice until the public screams about it enough. It's actually horrifying how many of these exact types of cases appear every single day. The bias against black people by the police and other institutions that are meant to dispense justice is so disgustingly obvious that you'd actually have to live under a rock to deny it. And it looks like this time the fuckers in power finally broke the camel's back. As many of you know by now, riots have broken out in Minneapolis where Floyd was murdered and in other places in America, and everyone has a take on it, including our totally not racist President Donald Trump, who directly quoted a Miami police officer who threatened violence against black civil rights protesters in 1969. When the looting starts, the shooting starts, eh? Classy, you sick fuck. Oh, and here's what I have to say to all the soft libs trying to claim that rioting does nothing for our cause and it's completely immoral and should never be done. Riots are a natural response to heated conditions wherein repeated attempts at legal and peaceful change have gone ignored. Honestly, I could never say it better than Martin Luther King Jr. did, so I won't try.
I think America must see that riots do not develop out of thin air. Certain conditions continue to exist in our society, which must be condemned as vigorously as we condemn riots. But in the final analysis, a riot is the language of the unheard. What is it that America has failed to hear? It has failed to hear that the plight of the Negro poor has worsened over the last few years. It has failed to hear that the promises of freedom and justice have not been met. And it has failed to hear that large segments of white society are more concerned about tranquility and the status quo than about justice, equality, and humanity. And so in a real sense, our nation's summers of riots are caused by our nation's winters of delay. And as long as America postpones justice, we stand in the position of having these recurrences of violence and riots over and over again. Social justice and progress are the absolute guarantors of riot prevention.
God, can you believe how timeless that is? Oh, it's almost like history repeats itself because nobody fucking learns. Still not convinced that a more peaceful way doesn't seem to be working? Derek Chauvin had 18 complaints against him before he killed George Floyd, and only one of them resulted in any kind of discipline. Just like a written letter of reprimand. Now, granted, anyone can file a report against a cop, so the number itself doesn't prove as much as I would like it to, at least not without further details about his internal affairs complaints. But, I think if Chauvin was going to be properly punished for misconduct, he would have been by now. You want to try to tell me he was reported 18 times and not one of them was legitimate? Really? This psycho? What more do you want people to do? Ask the people with no incentive to stop abusing others to please actually stop this time. I mean, it's not like George Floyd wasn't literally begging him to let him breathe or anything. But nah, obviously issuing a formal complaint would have resulted in Chauvin being immediately arrested, right? I'm sure the riots had nothing to do with it. No. Guys, Stonewall was a riot. You want to try to tell me that the Stonewall riots shouldn't have happened because they were more violent than peaceful protests? Do you really want to make that argument? Alright, I gotta calm back down for just a little bit. So there is one nuance I think we all need to address when we support the rioters involved in a cause. See, sometimes people get hurt or even die because of riots. Sometimes it's because of cops. But either way, riots are not pleasant. They're not good. Someone was recently shot dead during the Minneapolis riots. It's not something to celebrate. However, remember what MLK said. You can't focus all your energy on condemning riots when you should be devoting just as much outrage against the institutional injustices that caused them. Riots are a reaction to violence that is already happening. Morally condemning civil rights riots is like morally condemning someone for self-defense. If you didn't want them to punch someone, you shouldn't have sat around and refused to help them while they were being beaten every day by the person they punched. And for the love of God, you don't tell victims that they're just as bad as their abusers. Someone getting killed in the crossfire of riots is not the same thing as someone, a cop, who is supposed to uphold integrity and justice, going on a psychotic power trip and knowingly killing a guy for 8 minutes straight. Don't even try to pretend that these are the same thing. If you're okay with police tear-gassing protesters because they broke some buildings or started yelling, but you shrug your shoulders at police brutality and go, that's life, I guess, maybe you might want to rethink your priorities. Police brutality kills far more people than riots do, and just because I'm not stupidly targeting the rioters with my righteous anger doesn't mean I'm celebrating the deaths of civilians who get caught in the crossfire. With all that said, I am calling for this to become as big as possible. The whole damn country needs to remember George Floyd and get better. I may be a selfish fuck sometimes, plus I'm white, but I am not going to be silent about this, and neither should you. Before I end the video, I want to encourage all of you to read up on this, as I am not able to provide every detail and fact about the situation, and it is always changing and evolving. I left links to every article I read to brief myself on this below, as well as 2 videos about the events of the last few days that essentially go far more in depth with my takes and probably explain it better than I could. More importantly, I have also left links to petitions and educational sources that you can go to if you want to support the protesters, as well as the official GoFundMe for George Floyd's family, and another for a local black-owned business that unfortunately got caught in the crossfire of the riots. Even if you can't donate, please make yourself heard. Support and defend black people. Or you're dead to me. Also, telling people to honor Floyd's death by remaining peaceful and ultimately maintaining the status quo is gaslighting. Nice job, you two.